next stop on the Super Sentai train, and it's funny I say it that way because it's Sentai ToQger. I really should have been more creative with my intros, but whatever. There's only 5 left, and that was derived from Tokyo 6 or Orange's roll call. Yeah, when I first found out about this season, it's like, oh, trains, huh? That's interesting. I think something to note is that, Japan has their own train otaku culture, and I think just in general they are very proud of their subway and public transportation system and their Shinkansen, and they very damn well should be, because it is a fantastic transportation system. How we in California wish it was that good, but it's not, so we don't. So we put up with traffic. Anyway, I'm not gonna get into it. With that being said, I guess just into the things that I liked and the things that kind of threw me off. Actually, I guess that kind of goes under both categories if I combine it with the others. So this actually kind of counts as both something I really liked and then also kind of threw me off. So I'm just gonna talk about it in one go. So kind of what I mentioned before, that Japan has a unique train culture. It didn't really occur to me at first, but I would probably consider this one of those seasons when they do something Japanese or extra Japanese. They go extra with it, and I think I would say this actually kind of qualifies because of the unique train culture that Japan has, as well as some of the things that I'm going to talk about. I liked how it plays on the core theme of this season was imagination and memories, and how important that is for the development of the characters and how the story progresses. Because for one thing, teaching kids to always have your imagination, and even when you grow up, don't let that imagination die. I think it's just a good general message to have, and you kind of see it in something like Up or even Toy Story or any Pixar movie really. And actually how they use trains, how the season and how the villains trains kind of take kids to a place of darkness. It actually kind of plays on the idea of being spirited away, much like the Miyazaki movie, kind of. So the thing that really threw me off when I figured it out, and kind of cements it in my book as one of the the extra, when they do Japanese, they go extra with it, is that part of the story premise is that a lot of the places they visit, the towns that they visit, and the reason why they have a monster of the week is because it's swallowed in darkness. And part of the ToQger's mission or goal is to eventually remember and find their old home. And then when it clicked in my head, I'm like, that's some Kingdom Hearts stuff. Because Kingdom Hearts kind of does the same thing. Maybe ToQger doesn't have cool crossovers between Final Fantasy or Super Sentai and Disney characters, but the story premise for anyone who has or hasn't tried to follow the Kingdom Hearts lore, at least for the first one, the big premise was all of the different worlds, the storybook worlds, the worlds that are well known in Final Fantasy and in Disney. So all the fairy tale worlds were being swallowed by darkness, and that's why the main character in Kingdom Hearts was able to actually go from place to place, visiting different Disney stories, and and his town was swallowed by darkness, and they're trying to remember stuff, and that's just the first one. As you go through the second and the third and all the ones in between, it's And then with that being said, like, and something about that is just, I don't know how else to describe it other than just saying it's really Japanese. And what I think I mean by that is it's usually something I only see in Japanese media, whether it's film and movies, anime, or Super Sentai video games. I'm wondering how much of it is just a difference between Western and Japanese storytelling and media, censorship, and just understanding the values and the taste that most Japanese viewers like, and how much of it actually might be rooted in something like Shintoism or Buddhism, or old Japanese folk tales. So I'm really curious about that. I hope to eventually unfold that as I continue my journey as a consumer and potential creator, but we'll see. So when it clicked in my head, I'm like, oh, that's Japanese. Or maybe it's something that's just someone in Japan, when they were creating their stories and their styles, that someone just did and everyone just kind of started to add it to their style. And I think an example of it might be kind of like the difference between US Western comics and cartoons, and just how when Japan made manga and anime, like the early to mid 1900s, and just the stark difference and uniqueness that I had compared to the US Western counterparts. I'm just maybe it could have been from that. And so I'm just really curious, like, how it came to be, and why I sort of categorize this thing as being Japanese. And I wonder if anyone else has picked up on it. Maybe I'm not even talking about something new, I just haven't actually found the answer. But it was really fun to discover that and unravel that, and put it together and kind of think about it. And I hope to continue encountering this as I go on. Something that I actually kind of enjoyed about this season was a lot of the villain turmoil and villain infighting, because that was kind of its own subplot in and of itself. With previous seasons, I felt like most of the time the villain subplots were just there to move the Rangers stories forward, because when they start to fight and and their organization starts to crumble, then it provides an opening for the Rangers to win and be victorious and stuff like that. Whereas with this, I felt like it was its own subplot, and although it still eventually does provide an opening for the ToQgers to come in and kind of dismantle everything, it was a bit interesting, because there's a lot of politics and, I guess you can say, a wedding involved, and they kind of use a little bit of a French Victorian style, because when you think of French Victorian style, you sometimes think of steampunk, and steampunk is trains, right? So they actually, or at least with the villains, they incorporate a lot of those themes, because one's a general who actually looks like a general with the hat and the uniform and everything, and then they're referring to each other as Duke and Duchess, and then there's the wedding, and it's the whole thing. And then just how it progresses is pretty interesting by itself. And yeah, and that was the first time I really noticed it. So maybe when I go back around to watching the previous seasons, maybe I'll notice more of the villain subplots, and if they can stand alone as their own, if that makes any sense. So although I don't think they would ever try to adapt this into Power Rangers. They actually did adapt one of the villains, in they used the suit, they kind of repainted, redesigned it a little bit, and they put it on a different face, but that suit is actually used in Power Rangers Ninja Steel and Super Ninja Steel. Because of how different and unique it is, I don't think they're going to try to adapt it into the US. But, again, I think that just lends itself to how different and unique this season was. So something that kind of threw me off. It was kind of cool, but other than it being cool, I didn't really see much of a reason to do it. But all the Rangers can switch colors. So that's why they usually try to refer each other by number, because if you try to refer to them by color, it could actually be any one of them. The leader, who is usually red, is 1, or Ichigo. Blue is 2, so Nigo. 3 is yellow, Sango. 4 is usually green, so green is usually 4, so Yongo. 5 is, or pink is 5 is usually pink, and Gogo. And then 6 is Urokogo, which I don't think you actually can switch with them, if I'm trying to remember correctly. But then with switching colors, they actually can switch weapons, but maybe not necessarily abilities. For instance, ToQger, so one who's usually green, has a big axe, and then anytime anyone else has to use it, it's too heavy for them. Other than switching colors and weapons, they don't even switch powers. It was a little weird why they did it. It was cool. Kind of, being able to briefly see a female Red Ranger or a male Pink Ranger. That stuff's fine, that's cool, but I didn't really understand why. Maybe they were experimenting with it, and maybe that's what led it to just being a unique season. I'll give it that much. So, as the story progresses, and as they're trying to find their hometown, spoiler alert, they kind of remember that they're only kids, and they kind of had to physically grow in order to escape from their town being enveloped in darkness. But then that's why they were able to keep their imagination and other story mechanics like that. With everyone technically still being a child, it was a little weird. It was different, unique, but weird. Well, first of all, if this gets a 10th anniversary special, or they make appearances in the any kind of anniversary special, they can only use the older forms. I mean, they kind of briefly use the child forms in the ToQger ToQger special that I'll get to later, but for the most part, they can't use their kid forms forever. The actors and actresses who portrayed the little kids are going to grow up, so they can't even use that mechanic. The characters are eventually going to grow into the ages that they were when they were Super Sentai, if that makes any sense. So then, and then they'd have to try to do something with it moving forward. I think it would actually be pretty interesting to see how they do that, but maybe going back to the message of trying to maintain your memories and your imagination even as an adult. I'd actually be down to see that. I think that'd be pretty interesting to watch. So I think that's kind of why it threw me off at first, but now that I'm talking about it and thinking about it, it's like, that'd be cool. I'd want to watch that. It's also the first time that a Ranger team was all kids in that sense, because for the most part everyone was around the same age group. Like the average, maybe they had one person who's really young, or one person who's really old, like almost immortal kind of old, and they have the occasional Kid Ranger here and there. I mean, they kind of have one in Q Ranger, but it's just one out of 12. But then with this one, it was all 5, and then 6 or orange was actually from the Shadow line, which is the villain group. He actually has a pretty fun, interesting backstory, although his character is unique. But so was the season. I guess speaking of uniqueness, I may as well just talk about my favorite episode, and that was Station 26, the fight that started in a bathhouse. I was really trying to figure out what episode I was going to talk about, and just kind of thinking about and reflecting about the whole season, and thinking about how unique this season is, especially as a foreigner who didn't grow up in Japan. This episode definitely stood out. I mean, the other episode I was going to choose was ToQger's introduction episode, and how he always thinks he's like, this is the place he's gonna die, and just how I liked his character, and it was interesting. But it does feel like a lot of episodes before, and just kind of a general superhero story where it doesn't matter who you were, it doesn't matter what you did, it's like it only matters what you do now, kind of a deal. So then I decided to go with this episode because of how unique it was and how much it stood out. And basically it covered the rules of a bathhouse, even though I kind of know about bathhouses from learning Japanese, and kind of learning about them through friends and different cultures. And although I've never been in a bathhouse before, it was definitely unique. It wasn't like a PBS special of like how you go to a bathhouse. It still felt like a Super Sentai episode, and it was actually kind of funny because they'd have these tips and rules, and they even kind of do like a funny trope where when they finish in the bathhouse, then they need to put their hand on their hip and then drink a glass of coffee milk or something like that. So it was actually kind of funny. Although I had seen characters in a bathhouse before in Super Sentai or even in onsen, I've never seen an episode where they actually kind of break down bathhouse rules like this. So it was definitely unique to me as someone who didn't grow up in Japan or even frequent bathhouses, because I think here in LA they actually do kind of they kind of have it with like Wii Spa and stuff like that, but it was definitely unique. Oh, as a fun side note, apparently there were 2 Super Sentai alumni in this. So the owner of the bathhouse is played by the same character who plays Mugen Sai from Hurricane. Okay, so he wasn't the Sentai Ranger, but he was actually the Hurricane's mentor. And to be fair, for like 90% of the season, he was a hamster, so I wouldn't have been able to recognize him. Also, his human form in Hurricane had long hair, and again, that's enough to throw me off. And then the second Super Sentai alumni who we see is the same person who portrayed Time Green, and in Time Ranger he was a teenager, I think. Well, technically he was also an alien, but in this he's like an adult with a suit. He doesn't have like styled or like dyed hair, and I was like, I didn't recognize him at all. But then after reading about it, I'm like, what? And then I go back, I look, I'm like, I can see it. That you can kind of see in the face. It was just, it's a fun little surprise. I don't know. Oh, and the character that he portrays is basically someone who's trying to buy the bathhouse property because it's over something that the Shadow line needs, because he's one of the Shadow monsters. Oh, I guess I might as well throw this in there. In the bathhouse episode, when the guys are in their towels, man, they are shredded. They are ripped. Well, okay, I read the difference, but I forget which one's which. They're not like bulky, muscular like here in the U.S., but they're definitely like, you know, super toned. I guess shredded, really lean, which, you know, is kind of the body type that you need for, you know, Super Sentai when you're wearing the suits, and especially because a lot of stunt actors, or at least, you know, Japanese and, you know, even Chinese and Korean stunt actors, they have that kind of body type. So I guess it shouldn't surprise me, but when they were shirtless, it's like, damn, they are shredded. I'll get there one day. Well, we'll see. But yeah, I just kind of chose this episode that because of how much it stuck out to me, because of how unique it was, in that I'd never seen a dedicated bathhouse episode in Super Sentai before, in that, you know, especially as a foreigner, I am not familiar with bathhouses, so it's definitely something I should try when traveling to Japan. And, you know, for one thing, you know, in one of the episodes of ToQger, I don't remember which one, in the credit scene, or the post-credit scene, where they have like a little moment to like acknowledge an award they got from like the Department of Transportation or something, and how the show is kind of pushing forward travel and transportation or something like that. And it kind of gave me a little bit of the travel bug, whether it's going to Japan or Korea, or, you know, I never set foot in Europe before, or just or even other places in the US. It kind of gave me a little travel bug. But, and it also kind of makes me wonder, like, oh, is that a, you know, they kind of acknowledge it in the episode as like, oh, the public bathhouses are kind of dying in popularity. So it's like, oh man, it's sad to see, you know, things that used to be really big and part of a certain culture kind of die off. But that's getting deep. I think the main reason why I really chose this episode is because of how unique it is, you know, and I feel like that kind of represents this season as a whole, because of how unique it was. It was, in my book, kind of extra Japanese, even though it didn't play on ninjas or samurai, or, you know, even Japanese pop culture. It played into something as unique as, you know, train otaku culture, because, you know, they have a train anime called Rail Wars, and then, you know, some of the story elements that they used, like, you know, the trains that were taking kids, was kind of a play on, you know, being spirited away, much like the Miyazaki movie. Not that the girl was taken on a train to be spirited away, but that, you know, kind of folk tale, or, you know, myth of being spirited away. And then when it clicked for me, like, oh, a town's being devoured by darkness, and, you know, trying to remember where they're from, and then, like, it clicking in my head, it's like, yeah, Kingdom Hearts. And, you know, that's, like, for me, Japanese, or at least as someone who didn't grow up in the culture, didn't kind of, you know, outside looking in, that's kind of what it comes to me as. And it's unique, it's different, although, you know, on the surface it's like, trains, huh? But, you know, after giving it a chance and really watching it, I can appreciate it for, you know, trying different things, and, you know, being unique. And, you know, it's a solid season. It's different, but, you know, that's kind of the best parts of the season.